It's a war of superlatives, unfortunately. I mean, it's tragedies within tragedies within tragedies. So my name is Jonathan Fowler. I'm the Senior Communications Manager here at UNRWA, which is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees. Our agency was created by the United Nations General Assembly in 1949. Our mandate has been repeatedly renewed ever since 1949. Not because we, somehow want to stay what we do, but because there's been no just and lasting solution to what is the most protracted refugee crisis in modern history. In normal times, if we could call them that, our work is very specific and very different from other entities in the United Nations system, which is that we are a direct service provider. So we're quite a large organization. We have 30,000 people in the region, and we provide kind of governmental public service style services. So that would be, education, healthcare, but anything through to garbage collection, water sanitation, these kind of things. That's something that we've been doing basically since our inception, which was to provide sort of relief and works, but actually it's evolved into this kind of public service style role. This also means that the overwhelming majority of our staff are Palestinians themselves. We're just not even 200 internationals working for this organization. So that's a very, very specific nature of UNRWA. There are almost 6 million registered Palestine refugees across the region in the 5 areas where we work. The nature of our work is very different, particularly currently in the Gaza Strip compared to elsewhere, because we have the largest footprint on the ground in the Gaza Strip of any United Nations agency. We have 13,000 staff in Gaza. But at the moment, if you like, the epicenter of what we're doing is Gaza, just because it's the biggest operation, because it's an unprecedented humanitarian crisis.
If you can describe this humanitarian crisis and the humanitarian conditions in Gaza, how would you describe the situation now?
I mean, it's a war of superlatives, unfortunately. I mean, it's tragedies within tragedies within tragedies. Operational challenges on the ground in the Gaza Strip are huge, because it's not possible for us to get aid easily around the Gaza Strip, not in the way that is required to meet the needs of the population. We've repeatedly been denied permissions by the Israeli authorities to move around. And indeed, in March, they actually banned us from taking any aid to the north for various reasons to do with their relationship with UNRWA. But given that we're the largest humanitarian agency, that posed enormous problems for trying to ensure that we were able to stem the man-made famine in the north of the Gaza Strip. The issue of actually getting any aid in to the Gaza Strip, operationally, the predictability of the flow of aid is very, very difficult. The amount of aid coming in is nowhere beginning to meet the needs of the civilian population. The level of risks to people inside the Gaza Strip means that it's now extremely difficult to even come to the crossings to pick up aid. And I want to stress that the responsibility of the Israeli authorities is not just to, allow aid to be brought in and then just left there to be collected. They're meant to ensure that aid flows properly within the Gaza Strip. But in other words, there's a kind of perfect storm of being unable to sort of move around safely, unable to get proper permissions, and unable to get enough in. And the people on the ground in the Gaza Strip pay the price.
Do you have any measures in how much that you get in and how much that are needed?
Well, the benchmark to meet the minimum needs of the population is 500 trucks a day, and that includes food and other supplies. Now, at no point since the start of this war have we ever got anywhere near 500 trucks a day. One of the reasons for this is that the inspection requirements from the Israeli authorities for bringing in aid, they require trucks to arrive half empty because it's easier to inspect. So that means if the Israeli authorities say, today we inspected, 100 trucks, they're talking about 100 half-empty trucks. 340 was the best performance just on the eve of the escalation. But then, of course, with the escalation in Rafah, the Rafah crossing was closed. What aid has been coming in has only really been coming in through Kerem Shalom. And it's been, I think the total number of trucks that have come in, aid trucks anyway, since the beginning of the escalation is about 450 since the start of the escalation. So, that's talking about, we need 500 a day, but actually we've managed about, not even 500 in a month.
Can you tell me a little bit about how the situation are in Rafah now?
Nowhere is safe in the Gaza Strip, literally nowhere. So, people receive these, what's known as evacuation orders. We prefer to think of this as forced displacement because the element of choice, it's like, get the hell out now, move to somewhere else. But the amount of time that people are given to go to somewhere, which is perceived to be safe but actually isn't, is very, very limited. And then we've seen these constant cases where people, it's not clear exactly where the alleged safe zone is or isn't. So, people are constantly having to move, in fact, on average, of the around 1.7 million people in the Gaza Strip who've been displaced from their homes, on average, people have been displaced once a month. So people, have gone from one place to another place to another place. And in fact, the population of Rafah, as a result of these repeated waves of displacement, just before this escalation, it was around 1.4 million people, which is about 5 times higher than its pre-war population. So imagine what that means in terms of the strain on infrastructure. The shelters were overburdened. People were living in tented camps. The people who left Rafah, and our shelters in Rafah are empty now. People left. They went to Khan Yunis, notably, which it's ruins basically. Khan Yunis was flattened in the fighting earlier on this year. People also went to this area called Al Mawasi, which was basically an agricultural area by the coast. There's no infrastructure there as such, so this is just like a sea of tents. In Rafah itself, around 100,000 displaced people remain. These are people who either chose to remain because they just felt that was the appropriate choice, or they're sick of moving on, they're just taking the risk.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how your institutions and your infrastructure has been attacked during the military operations?
Overall, since the start of this war, more than 180 of our facilities in the Gaza Strip have been impacted in one way or another by the war, in several hundred separate incidents. So that means that some places have been hit multiple times. Now, there's an important point here, which is there's no mystery about what an UNRWA facility is. These are United Nations facilities under the protection of the United Nations flag, in the Gaza Strip. Their coordinates are clearly known to all parties to this conflict. Any military use or any military attack on such facilities is unacceptable under international humanitarian law. In fact, our Commissioner General, Philippe Lazzarini, has really underscored this, that when the guns fall silent in this war, there needs to be a full impartial international investigation into the total disregard for UN facilities in this war. What we have seen is that the Gaza Strip is now the deadliest place in the world to be a United Nations employee, an aid worker generally, or indeed a journalist. What we have seen is that the disregard for the safety and security of aid workers and the sanctity of UN facilities, that is clear. That is absolutely clear. And there needs to be accountability for that. But this cannot be allowed to become a new normal. We've had 193 of our staff have been killed in the Gaza Strip. This is an unprecedented number since the creation of the United Nations. It's the highest death toll for United Nations personnel anywhere in the world in the history of the UN. The level of what we're seeing in the Gaza Strip risks raising the bar of what is considered acceptable. And then if that gets, and I use the term acceptable, of course, in inverted commas there, it's not acceptable. But, if the bar is moved, then this creates a precedent for other places around the world. And that's a very, very, very dangerous zone that we find ourselves in.